do better work, your customers and your employees are waiting. Now get on with it.
We have the pleasure of welcoming Adrian Swinscoe today to our interview series. I'm Vanessa Rose from the peopleHum team. Let's begin with just a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experience and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and the video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest. Adrian is a customer service and experience mentor with an experience of over 15 years. He is also a leadership coach and delivers keynotes and masterclasses on the same. He is also the best-selling author, Forbes contributor, blogger, and podcaster, and a frequent conference speaker. Bringing with him a large range of experience, we are happy to have someone of his expertise on our interview series. Welcome, Adrian. Thrilled to have you.
Hi, how you doing? Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me to thanks for having me on and all that.
So the first question I had for you, Adrian, was, we came to know about a newsletter you own called Punk CX. Can you please tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So the Punk CX newsletter was something I started while I was developing a book that I wrote that came out sort of last year called Punk CX, and it was just about trying to almost put the idea out there about what Punk CX is before the book came out, and just to see who was kind of interested, as it were, and just to update people on the progress of the book. The basic premise of the idea is that I believe that the experience space, that includes both customer experience and employee experience, that whole space that deals with experience is becoming a little bit like prog rock did in the 1970s. I.e., prog rock was this, whilst it was popular, it was kind of a very complicated, very elaborate, self-indulgent style of kind of rock music. So it's almost a bit like how many notes you could play, blah, 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 kind of like, rather than kind of like anything kind of else. And it almost required you to be almost like have a PhD in music to be able to kind of to contribute or participate. And many people thought, well, that's just rubbish. It's not inclusive. It's very exclusive, in fact. And so punk exploded out the back of that. And punk was this DIY, democratic sort of do-it-yourself form of music where anybody could learn how to play drums or guitar or sing or whatever, and could have a go at it. And that sort of change in kind of rock music kind of genres sort of made me think, well, if the experience space is looking a lot like prog rock, i.e. it's overly concerned with, codification, certification, frameworks, benchmarks, maturity curves, all these different sort of things, and it's becoming almost so complicated that it's in danger of losing sight of employees and customers, the people that are supposed to benefit from all of this, then it's in danger of disappearing up its own arse, if you excuse my expression. And my question was, like, therefore, what would a punk version of that look like? What would a back to basics, do it yourself, dare to be different approach kind of be? And that's kind of why I started the newsletter, and that's kind of why I developed the book on it. And the book is not like another business book in that it's like lots of kind of like black ink on white pages. It is like this on the inside. It is like a fanzine. It's designed to be. I describe it as being a visual slap in the face for the experience industry, because it's to try and encourage people by being provocative and being direct and being to the point, to encourage people to dare to be different, to think differently, to realize that the work that they do matters, and not to settle for second best. And so that's kind of why this whole thing around the punk sort of kind of CX came about. And I know your question said, tell me a little bit about it, but that's possibly quite a lot about it. But that's kind of fine. I was going to stop rambling there.
Yeah, it's very interesting how you related a music genre to employee experience.
Yeah, I like music. I mean, I'm a bit of a fan of punk in myself. And what's interesting is that by doing that, by trying to relate it to music, that people get it and people relate to it. Whether you like prog rock or you like kind of punk music or kind of whatever, people still get it, because music is it's like a universal language. Yeah, no, people just get it. Doesn't matter if you speak, kind of Hindu or English or Mandarin or Spanish or kind of, whatever. Everybody gets music. The rhythm in the kind of the beat and kind of the formulation of it all, people kind of get that. And I think that's the thing, is when you kind of talk about I was luckily enough to able to tell a story that relates to people's personal experience. People go like, okay, now I get it. So that's cool.
So that's such a clever way to make yourself relevant and differentiate yourself.
Well, it was an accidental sort of thing. It wasn't necessarily deliberate. It was just something that occurred to me. The actual origin of the idea comes from a discussion I had with a friend of mine, Oshin, in the pub over a few pints of Guinness. So what some drunks might call a moment of clarity. But I would say it would be Guinness-inspired insight. So, I can't take responsibility for all of it. I think Guinness has to kind of take some responsibility for it too.
It worked out well.
Yeah.
So, Adrian, do you think employee experience drives customer experience? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think I think that absolutely. I think it's absolutely the creation of a great employee experience is absolutely at the center of delivering a great customer experience. But I'd go beyond that. I think that because people think about this idea that you've got employee experience and then you've got customer experience, and I used to write it almost as a mathematical function, where you have CX for customer experience is equal to a function of, and then open brackets, EX, i.e. employee experience. And for a time I was quite happy about that, because I could see the idea that if you create the right environment and the right system for employees to have a great experience, and I'm not just talking about them being happy and satisfied, I'm talking about the whole thing. And a bit like how you hire them, how you onboard them, how you treat them, how you educate them, how you train them, how you do all those different sort of things, how you help them achieve, how you help them develop, how you help them thrive in the environment that you can create. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that's an absolute driver in terms of the levels of productivity and effort and insight and creativity and everything else that's going to drive the delivery of a great customer experience. But that's only part of the story, because actually if you think about the employee experience and you think about how the number of either different people or different agencies or different firms or different partners that companies rely on to deliver the experience that they want for their customers, then it can't just be about the employee experience. It has to be about the broader ecosystem, which I call sort of the WX, which is like the worker experience. So you have customer experience, I think, is a function of both employee experience, which is your internal dynamic, and the W experience, which is more your external dynamic that comes from your agencies, your contractors, your delivery firms, all these different sort of people that input into the overall experience. And if you don't think about those things, then you end up opening yourself up to kind of weakness or overlooking certain elements, because it might feel like on the surface things are going well, but if you haven't looked at how you treat kind of the people that sit in that ecosystem and how it all connects together, then you're missing a large part of kind of what you need to be really looking at, I believe.
So true. It's not just one department; it's the entire organization.
And it's beyond the organization. It's like the organizational ecosystem that that is all working together to try and feed that, to try and deliver to that customer. And if we do that, then it's like, how does all that, we need to go beyond just kind of where we are and think about all the things that help us to help them.
What are the key elements that an organization should incorporate in their culture for a great customer experience?
So, like, if I think about kind of what I just kind of said, if we think about kind of like an ecosystem and a system, how it all works together, I think that one of the challenges that I have with many of, people talk about culture initiatives, or building our culture. Now that's all very well and good. But I also kind of think the thing that people overlook is the idea that culture in large part culture is in large part is a product of the system that we create and the system's conditions and the environment that we create. It's a bit like we were talking before, and I used this sporting analogy. Like, say for example, you use kind of like football, or we call it football in the UK. Other people around the world call it soccer. And you imagine you end up having the rules of the game that come with football, and it tells you about what you can and what you can't do, and it tells you about how if you're kind of winning, and what should the structure of the game be in terms of time and length and so on and so forth. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't tell you how to play the game. And what we see different teams will operate in what they'll call in football terms, they're different systems, and different systems require different types of players and different attributes and different characteristics, and have different tempos and rhythms to them, as it were. And I think that's the thing, is we spend too much time thinking about, there's too many people that think about how we want our people to behave. And so that becomes almost like culture that gets impressed on people, rather than thinking about what are the systems conditions that we want to create, and then let our culture emerge from that. Because it's the one key thing that in the human terms, I think, is like, in large part, trying to force people to do something and telling people the way that they should be or shouldn't be is kind of hard to do. Actually, more likely is that there's this kind of really good sort of little saying which says, culture is a bit like a reputation. It's a bit like culture. Your real culture shows up when you're not watching, or when you're not in the room, sort of thing. And actually, so that what that basically implies is you can't tell people what to do. You can't force them to be a certain kind of way. What you can do is you can try and create the right conditions for them for which they can thrive, and at the same time, you hire the right people that are going to fit into that, and then you support them to be as good as they can be in in that environment, and not the other way around. Too many organizations don't think enough about changing their organizational structure to achieve their kind of output. Too many organizations think about things when they'd say that, oh, we need to be outside in our approach to the market. Yet, if you look at those organizations, they've not restructured themselves to accommodate that outside in approach. They're still designed inside out. They're still designed along functional lines. And so they're trying to fit customer demand into this kind of old and traditional sort of like style. And that's why you get a lot of time you get these suboptimal results.
So it's not expecting everybody to be the same, but to accept differences and then play on them.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a bit like, people talk about culture as being isolated from other things. It's not. It's completely connected.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit like, you go back to your question around employee experience, is too many times that people kind of separate these things out and try and do them in isolation. You're like, well, that makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're all intrinsically connected, then we should be thinking and looking at them in a very connected way.
So true. What challenges do you see startups facing when it comes to establishing a marquee platform for customer experience?
Crumbs a lot, but then that's the same for pretty much every startup. I mean, I would suggest the biggest thing for, we go back to my original point around the kind of punk CX thing. This is, the experience is becoming a crowded marketplace, very, very crowded, and therefore the idea of taking over the world and being kind of like different is a big ask, and so you have to start small. With every kind of business, it's all about one, trying to keep it simple. In startup terms, you probably want to start with what's our minimum viable product for our customers, for our customer number one, as it were, and how do we get customer number one, or how do we kind of like recruit a bunch of beta customers that helps us, test and validate our proposition, and then we start growing from there, and then beyond that, it's like, how do we get paying customer number one, and how do we build up from that? So basically, think about the big wide world and focus on a little world and define what the little world is. And actually, the thing that you talk about, rather than talking about this marquee platform, which sort of implies we're going to be, the next best thing. But that's the next best thing to the world, as it were. I would say you need to forget about that and you need to kind of stay focused on, you need to be the next best thing for your next customer and for your current customers. And if you do the best job that you can do with a small group, and then hopefully that becomes a growing group, and you keep looking after and keep nurturing and keep developing, and then you build your own little community, and you keep doing a good job for them, then hopefully with a fair wind and a lot of, a great amount of success, you will be successful, and your customers will help you be successful, and they will talk about you, and you could get to that point that you become the next best thing to everybody. But there's an old Confucian saying that says the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, right? And so you got to keep stepping. But you got to keep looking about where you're stepping, because actually 1,000 miles down the road doesn't matter. What happens is the next step, and then the next step after that, and the next step after that. That's it. You've just got to be, and even though people get excited about big valuations or this, that, and the other, who cares? Customers don't care if you're $1 billion kind of unicorn. Customers don't give a hoot. Customers want to pay you some money for you to do a great job for them. That's it.
So it's more about the short-term goals you set for yourself, until you reach there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, but you should never stop. It becomes that thing about discipline, right? And it's about focus. It's like, if you have a company that's focused on the big valuations and things, then you lose sight of the smaller stuff that actually kind of like that your success is dependent on. It's like a great example of you're familiar with a guy called Warren Buffett?
Yes.
So Warren Buffett is one of the richest men in the world, and it's just done through largely through investment and things. But he doesn't care about the money, really. He just really enjoys what he does, is investing and trying to improve companies and trying to identify undervalued companies and things like this. The money is a product of what he does. Actually, he's intent on giving most of it away, right? So he's focused on doing the absolutely right thing, realizing that everything else will take care of itself. And that's the thing. And he's been doing that. Him and his partner Charlie Munger have been doing it every day, day in, day out, for weeks and months and years and decades. And that's how they got. They were good. They got better at it. But that's kind of how they ended up changing things, because they're not focused on the money.
More of what you love.
Yeah, do what you love. I mean, and you know what, do what you love, and if you're lucky enough, then you'll get paid to do it. And if you're not lucky enough to do it, well, still give it a shot, and just to kind of see if you can make a success of it. If not, then find something else that either helps you get paid, but then maybe helps you continue to do what you can love as well. You should never give up what you what you love doing, because it's just such an enriching sort of thing.
So during these uncertain times, how do you think organizations should maintain their customer support?
So I think that what's interesting over the last kind of few weeks is watching how different organizations are faring in different ways. I mean, some organizations are they are furloughing their people, or they're shutting down. They're just trying to kind of survive. And or demand has just like dropped through the floor, and they're a bit like, whoa. So, and they're trying to then move their people to remote working, or they're furloughing or making people redundant, or some of them even closing down. So there's a lot of different experience out there. However, there's also some companies that are really busy, and what the thing that the big challenges that they've faced is that they've had to move many of their workers to remote working, and also deal with an increase in demand at the same time. And that's caused all sorts of challenges in terms of providing people with the right sort of tools and equipment to be able to work from home. It's provided some challenges to people around, can I work from home, and is my home a good place to work from? Not everybody's like as that as some people are better set up than others. I think there's also, from an employee character side of things, some people are better equipped to work on their own and from home than others are, and so it's proving a big challenge for people, and also for leadership and management as well, to look after the health and the well-being of their employees as they're working kind of in this new environment under these new conditions. But the thing I've been kind of talking about that is because that makes it all quite confusing and quite challenging, particularly when you're busy. Because when you're busy, you're like going, no, you just eats up time trying to kind of keep ahead of things. But then it means it becomes quite hard for you to think about the other things and the stresses and strains that people are going through. And I think people are talking about, business as usual, service as usual, whatever, or actually talking about, we just need to ramp things up, as it were. I actually think we're in a very strange place. And I think we need to think about this as an unusual situation. So it's like we should think about service as unusual. And to be successful, I believe, companies need to recognize that they cannot be perfect, but their customers will understand the challenges that we go through if we help them understand the challenges that we're going through, and if they know that we're trying to do the best by them, and that we're trying to look after our people at the same time. So that requires, I think, kind of two things. One is that or a number of things rather. But the first one I would say is we need to communicate as much as we can with our customers to let them know what we're going through and what we're doing to try and help them and also help our people, look after our people. We need to, but at the same time, we also need to ask our customers to step up, because we need our customers' help to be successful through this time as well. And only with them stepping up will we be successful. But that requires us to communicate way more than we've already done, and to ask for them to step up and almost kind of like be a partner with us through this kind of time, because we know they need help. We want to help them, but it may take a bit longer. And in order to kind of, to deliver on that, we need their help. And so I think it needs to be less of a them and us sort of thing, and more of an us sort of idea. And so I think there's a lot of people that are doing that, and only if we do that can we then start to, maintain and potentially build on the relationships that we have with our customers, but more, just as importantly, how we can manage and look after the health and the well-being of our people that are trying to help our customers. Because I think that's one of the big things that remote working for many people can be a challenge of, is like, how is it going to impact their mental health and their overall well-being? We still don't know that. That's something that will come out kind of as later, but we need to do the work, the groundwork now. We need to be paying attention to that sort of stuff now, because otherwise we'll end up losing people because they're just not well, and it'll be our fault because we haven't looked after them.
Yeah, so I was saying, especially in uncertain times, it matters most how organizations treat their customers.
Well, treat their customers and their people. I think there's different bits of research, some of which is coming out, around one of which was from Edelman, who generally do an annual trust barometer, and they've just released some new research that was, I think it was in March, saying that 90% of customers around the world that they surveyed are saying that they are watching brands and how brands are, what they're doing in this current time, and they're saying they want those brands to look after both their employees and their suppliers, and even if that costs them in the short run, because it's the right thing to do. Look after your people, look after your suppliers. Even if that costs you, because it's the right thing to do. And in the same piece of research, they also found that if they spot brands that are not doing as well as they would like to see, over 70% of them report that that would possibly result in them losing trust for that brand, almost forever, and they would be inclined never to do business with that brand ever again. And so there's the responsibility, whether that's true, because people say one thing sometimes and do another, but it's in their mind. And that's the thing. So it might not be 70%, but it could be 40%. And even 40% is a big number.
I like what you said. Even though the world is on lockdown, people are still watching brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Many people don't have much else to do rather than watch, because they're on furlough and things, and and they're so they're paying attention.
So with the increase in the millennial generation, the gig economy is on the rise. So what are the challenges that new organizations face when it comes to maintaining CX in this circumstance?
So I think the interesting thing about so I go back to what I was saying about this idea around customer experience is a function of employee experience plus worker experience, and the WX, the worker experience, would include the sort of the gig economy kind of workers, whether they are the designers or web designers, or they're delivery drivers, or they're the advisors or consultants or whatever they might be. So that's only going to grow. Companies are realizing that. I think there was a piece of research that I used when I wrote about this in the Punk CX, when I was saying that some companies are saying that I think they are about 40% of they did a calculation, about 40% of their workforce is sort of almost contracted out in many cases, and that's only going to rise because as people need to be more adaptable, more responsive, and so on and so forth. The interesting thing for the people that are in that sort of gig economy, as it were, is what's going to that's that sort of gig economy thinking is almost pre-virus thinking. But I'm wondering how that might change, given that the people that are in the gig economy are the ones that are getting the hardest hit. Because I know I've got kind of friends and colleagues that as soon as a lockdown happened, pretty much 95%, if not 100% of the work that they were doing just kind of went away. I'm lucky that I'm not in that situation. I've got stuff that's kind of keeping me going, which is great, and I've got more stuff coming in. So I'm very happy about that. I know I'm very fortunate, and I'm very grateful for that too. But given the situation that we're in, that whole gig economy sort of sphere is going to it's going to inject a degree of uncertainty into that kind of model, because the people that are in that sort of gig economy will get hit the hardest, because sometimes, and many of them are not supported by government, support programs and things. Some of them are, but many of them are not. And I'm wondering how this experience will affect them going forward, because we're now at the virus part. We've yet to see what the economic part of all this looks like. And I'm wondering how many, if the gig economy will still grow, if people will still be keen to be part of it when you end up with a tight economy that's going through a recession, and if people are going to look for more certainty by taking a job rather than actually trying to generate the next gig, as it were. And so it's still uncertain, and it's still uncertain about how that will impact an overall organization. It will impact an organization's ability to maintain kind of the experience, but right now we don't know how that's going to work. I don't think companies will be trying to. They know that things economically are going to start we're starting to start to feel the pinch. How they respond to that remains to be seen as yet.
Still too early to say.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we are only at the start of this. This is something that we are going to be, I think, living through the remnants of, or the residual effects of, for many, many years to come.
So, the last question, Adrian, do you have any important sound bites you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yes. Where's the camera? Do better work. Your customers and your employees are waiting. Now get on with it.
That's very solid. Okay. Thank you so much, Adrian.
You're very welcome. It's been a delight talking to you.
Yeah, I enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very, very much for asking me to be part of your interview series.
Really nice having you.